The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, members and industry friends. Thank you very much for joining us on this afternoon's webinar. My name's Joanne and I'm Head of Marketing at AFTA, and we have been running a series of webinars to make sure our members are informed about the COVID-19 situation and what AFTA is doing to support members. Today with me, I have Courtney Duddleston, who is Head of Strategy and Finance. And before I hand over to Courtney, I would like to just do a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, this webinar is being recorded and will be placed on the AFTA website. Every single webinar we do is available on the AFTA website, and we'll have it there by end of day today. You are all in listen-only mode, which means you can't talk, but we still want to interact with you. So if you have a question, please use the question toolbox and we'll allocate some time at the end of the session to address those. I'm now going to hand over to Courtney, and who's going to unpack the federal government stimulus package that was announced. Over to you, Courtney.
Well, thank you, Jo, and good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate you joining us today. So last week, I presented on the first stimulus package announced by the federal government. Following that, on Sunday, a second package was announced, an economic plan of $66.1 billion targeted at keeping Australians in work and businesses operating. In today's presentation, I will run through the key deliverables in this stimulus package with a particular focus on the support measures that are available for employers and sole traders. There are also a number of support services in place to assist and work with businesses and individuals affected by COVID-19, and I will provide these details. And lastly, we should have some time for general Q&As towards the end. On Sunday, the government released the second stage of its economic plan to cushion the impact of the coronavirus to the Australian economy. In total, $189 billion has been injected into the economy, including $17.6 billion in the first stimulus package, $90 billion from the RBA, $15 billion from the government to deliver easier access to finance, and $66.1 billion in this second round of its economic support package. It's unprecedented, and it works out at 9.7% of GDP. And so how does that compare to around the world? Well, the US $2 trillion stimulus package that has recently been announced is worth about 10% of the US GDP. The UK and Germany are amounting to around 15% of GDP. And New Zealand is currently around 4% of GDP. One of the key measures to assist employers is the Boosting Cash Flow Initiative. By linking the payments to business PAYG withholding, businesses are incentivized to hold on to more of their workers. I spoke in depth about this initiative in last week's seminar with some working examples. However, on Sunday, the government announced expansion of the parameters. So what exactly has changed? The government is now providing up to $100,000 to eligible small and medium-sized businesses that employ people with a minimum payment of $20,000. On 12 March, the measure was first announced, which initially provided up to $25,000 to business with a minimum payment of $2,000 for eligible businesses. SMEs with aggregated annual turnover of under $50 million and that employ workers are eligible. The government has now enhanced this measure and has also introduced an additional payment in the July to October period. Eligible entities will receive an additional payment equal to the total of all of the payments that have been received. This means that eligible entities will receive at least $20,000 up to a total of $100,000 under both of these payments. This additional payment has been designed to continue to help support cash flow over a longer period and to help employers retain their staff. Payments are expected to flow through from 28 April. It's also worth noting that these payments are tax-free. You do not have to complete any forms, and the payments will flow through automatically through the system by the ATO. Okay, so the Government, Reserve Bank of Australia and the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, or APRA, have taken coordinated action to support the flow of credit in the Australian economy, in particular for small and medium enterprises. The Government has established the Coronavirus SME Guarantee Scheme, providing support for these businesses. Under the scheme, the Government will provide a guarantee of 50% to SME lenders for the new unsecured loans to be used for working capital. This has been established to enhance these lenders' willingness and ability to provide credit, which in turn should result in SMEs being able to access additional funding to help support them in the coming months. It's important to remember, though, that this is a loan, not a grant, so this really has to be the right decision for you and your business. SMEs with a turnover of up to $50 million will be eligible to receive these loans. Now, keep in mind that this is not your TTV, but what is actually reported as income on your tax return. The Government will provide eligible lenders with a guarantee for loans with terms including a maximum total size of the loan of $250,000 per borrower. Loans will be up to 3 years with an initial 6-month repayment holiday, and the loans will be in the form of unsecured finance, meaning you will not have to provide an asset as security for the loan, such as your house. The scheme will be commencing by early next month and will be available for new loans made by participating lenders until 30 September 2020. Now, AFTA is currently in deep talks with a number of banks right now to further unpack this for our members. We want to know the easiest way that you can apply for this and how long it will take for you guys to start using the funds. What I can tell you right now is that each bank seems to have different criteria around this. So my suggestion is to speak now to your bank relationship manager if this is something that you want to look at. Banks will also prioritise current customers over new ones. So reach out to your current bank to look at starting this process. And our understanding from preliminary discussions is that this does not apply to overdrafts. On Sunday, the Government also announced measures to support sole traders that have been impacted, that perhaps do not employ any staff. It was great to see the Government delivering support measures for sole traders who did seem to have been missed in the first round. These include measures such as an increase to the instant asset write-off, a time-limited 15-month investment incentive by accelerating depreciation deductions, temporarily expanding eligibility to income support payments and establishing a new time-limited coronavirus supplement, access to the SME Guarantee Scheme, which I touched on just before, and early access to superannuation and tax support measures. In particular, I think it's important for us today to focus on the increased and accelerated income support, access to super and tax relief that we feel our members may benefit from. A measure that was introduced on Sunday is that sole traders may benefit from the expansion of eligibility to income support payments, along with the establishment of a new time-limited coronavirus supplement. If you're a sole trader and your income has been dramatically reduced, you may be eligible to apply for the JobSeeker Payment. Anyone who receives this is eligible for the coronavirus supplement, which is paid at the rate of $550 per fortnight. These changes will apply for the next 6 months and will not be income tested. New applicants of this can claim through MyGov from next month. So let's run through an example to put this into context. Chris is a sole trader. Chris's business has been successful over the years, and he's been able to build up a reasonable amount of assets during his career to a level that would ordinarily make him ineligible for an income support payment. The economic downturn due to coronavirus has adversely affected his business, and his income has now been reduced to zero. Chris will be able to apply for the new JobSeeker/coronavirus supplement and will not have his assets included as part of the eligibility assessment for the payment. He will also not be required to serve a liquid asset test waiting period, as this has also been waived. So Chris would be eligible for the JobSeeker payment, and let's say because he's married, he'll receive his JobSeeker payment partnered rate of $510.80 per fortnight plus $550 per fortnight for the coronavirus supplement, which would bring his total fortnightly income support payment to just over $1,000. And we understand it's not much, but hopefully it's enough to get by until this passes and business does pick up again, and it will. You will have heard by now that the government has enabled early access to superannuation for individuals affected by the coronavirus. This is a completely personal decision and one that only you can make yourself. Obviously, superannuation helps people save for retirement. However, the government has clearly recognised that for those who are significantly financially affected by COVID-19, accessing some of their superannuation today may outweigh the benefits of maintaining those savings until retirement. To apply for early release, you must be either unemployed, eligible to receive the JobSeeker payment, or have been made redundant or had your working hours reduced by 20% or more. If you are a sole trader and your business was suspended, or you have seen a reduction in your turnover of 20% or more, then you would also be eligible for this. The government has allowed for eligible individuals to access up to $10,000 before 1 July and a further $10,000 from 1 July this year for approximately 3 months. All of this can be done directly to the ATO through your MyGov and is available from mid-next month. It's worth noting as well that anyone accessing their superannuation will not need to pay tax on any of the amounts released. So I've included an example here just to understand how exactly this might work. Rachel is a sole trader with a travel agency business. At the end of July, Rachel seeks to apply for an early release from her superannuation for the 2020 to 21 financial year. Due to the economic effects of the coronavirus, Rachel's turnover for July is $5,000 compared to $10,000 on average per month for the second half of 2019. Rachel therefore determines that her turnover has reduced by more than 20% compared to her average turnover over the last 6 months of 2019. Rachel therefore self-certifies that she's eligible for early release and applies to have $10,000 released from her superannuation. A great support initiative in place is the ATO's dedicated support website, and I would encourage all attendees here to visit this site at some point to further understand what measures are in place to help you. The Tax Office has updated its website with essential information about tax and superannuation changes that have now become law following the passage of the government's economic support package through Parliament this week. There is detailed information about what you need to know or do in order to get access to the tax or superannuation measures that were announced by the government, including the early access to super, cash flow assistance, and various payment options available to assist businesses that have been impacted. Another useful tool is the business.gov.au website, where there is a great deal of up-to-date information around financial assistance, eligibility, and timing of the new government support measures for Australian businesses. There is great information on here around what you or your business can get and where to go for help. It's also really important to speak with your accountant and business advisors who will be able to provide specific advice and recommendations to what you are eligible for based on your circumstances. And I really want to emphasize the importance to negotiate around contracts where you can right now. We've had members asking about getting out of lease contracts, telco contracts and the like. And what I would say is that if you are looking to terminate a contract, speak with a lawyer. However, now more than ever, you should look to negotiate for cost savings where you can. We have even reached out to our landlord requesting a lease restructure to include a rent-free period, which would help greatly with cash flow. Your landlord has a vested interest in keeping you in business and retaining you as a tenant in order to prevent a situation where you're forced to vacate, the space sits vacant for 12 or so months, and is then released at a heavily discounted rent. So put all of your cards on the table, don't hold back, and tell them what a catastrophic time this is for our industry and businesses. What can they do to help you? Our marketing team are also working really hard to ensure members are kept up to date. So ensure that you're receiving our member EDMs. We've been holding a lot of webinars lately for our members, and these are all communicated to those who are signed up on our database. And lastly, there's a great deal of content on the AFTA website for you to refer to, including all past webinar recordings and a dedicated page around the various state and territory stimulus packages that have been announced. So I do hope that we've been able to unpack that a little further for you. There's a lot of information out there from a lot of different sources. The websites I provided are a great starting point that provide easy to understand information on what has been announced so far. And while we certainly welcome the government packages that have been announced, we know there is a lot more still to be done, and AFTA will continue to lobby hard for new measures that will help our members. So we do have some time for questions, and bear with us as the AFTA team are all working in different locations right now. Jo, is there anything that's come up that you might like to read out?
Yeah, fantastic, Courtney. Thank you for the detail. We do have a couple of questions just to clarify some of the detail. So the first one I'm going to read out is from Jo. What a fantastic name. And Jo just asks, how does the grant of the minimum $20,000 work? Is it a credit against BAS return with the difference being paid into our account via the ATO?
Great question, Jo. And yes, you're exactly right. So it would come through as a credit on your BAS. If there ends up being an amount that is refundable to you, the ATO has actually come out and said that they would commit to putting those refunds in your bank account within 14 days of lodgement.
Great. I've got a question from Lionel in regards to the Corona supplement. Courtney, can you just clarify if this is still tested with and includes the partner's income?
Okay, so my understanding, Lionel, is that yes, it's still income tested, which would include a partner income. However, it's not asset tested. That has been waived. I might take that one offline, Lionel, though, because I'd like to provide you a proper answer to that based on the ATO's website. But my understanding is that they've waived the asset test, but not the income test.
Great. And then just using your example, Courtney, and this is a little similar to Lionel's question, but we had the example in the webinar of Chris. So Anna's asking, what if Chris's wife is still working? Can her income affect his eligibility for the payment?
Yeah, okay. So my preliminary understanding of that is yes, because it would be income tested. And so my answer at this stage is yes, but we might have to look into that a little bit further because there seems to be a lot of tests that are being waived and a lot that aren't at this stage. We might take that one offline, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, sir.
The AFTA team is still looking into all the detail. Obviously, it's only just been announced. And so we are working through what the different elements of the package means, just at those final level of detail.
Thanks, Jo.
We've got a question from Chris, who wants to know that if a staff member is stood down, are they able to access the Centrelink payments, or must they be terminated to be eligible for this?
So great question, Chris. We're trying to get clarification on that from the Attorney General. Our understanding at this stage is no, they're not, but it seems that they've been waiving that at this stage. We, however, have not seen complete clarification around the 542, Section 542 of the workplace. So we need to get proper clarification from the Attorney General. We are working very closely with government to achieve that, and I expect we'll have a concrete answer in the coming days for you, Chris.
Great. Let me just have a look at some of the other questions that have come through.
Thanks, Jo.
Okay, so there are a couple of questions from individuals, actually a few questions, that talk about if I employ a full-time staff and I've got to reduce their hours, does that again make them eligible for assistance? So I think this goes back to your answer, still needing to work with the Attorney General on that.
Cool. If it's in relation to stand down, then we're still trying to get proper clarification from government in relation to that.
So in the case where they're still employed but reduced hours, does that make a difference?
Well, then they probably haven't been stood down.
Yes. Courtney, I did read somewhere that if you had an income under a certain amount a fortnight, I think it was $1,000 and something dollars, and because your income reduced, that you may be able to gain access to JobSeeker?
To JobSeeker and possibly the coronavirus supplement as well, correct. There's a lot more detail about on the ATO website that I provided, and you can actually filter that through with your particular circumstances as well to find out if you would be eligible.
Yes, great. And I think that's important to recognise is that everybody's situation is different. So it is worth going onto that website, having a read of it and understanding your own circumstances.
Yeah, that's right. We're very conscious of providing blanket responses with these sorts of things. But my details are there on the slide. I welcome any emails, any phone calls. If you've got a particular question, I'm happy to talk to you about your circumstances and what maybe you would be eligible for, or at least point you in the right direction. The AFTA team are here. We're happy to do everything that we can to help you to find out what you're eligible for and what assistance you can get from the government.
Great. Let me just look through a couple of other questions. Oh, great question from Melanie. Just referring to the unsecured government business loan backing. Melanie just asks, will the loans be subject to interest rates?
Oh, great question, Melanie. They will be subject to interest rates. Now, we're working very closely with the big four banks and many of the smaller subsidiary banks as well to find out. We really want to unpack this for our members, find out the quickest way that they can get access to this, if it's what they want, and what is the easiest and the quickest process for this. So, yes, interest rates are applicable. Now, at this stage, we understand there is a 6-month repayment holiday. However, that interest will continue to be accrued, and so it would end up being payable. Now, we don't understand there's any balloon payments or anything at the end of the loan term, but you will need to factor in that while you have that 6-month repayment holiday, interest will still be accruing.
Great. We have a question here asking about the release of super. Now, we know that we can get a maximum of $10,000 this financial year and a maximum of $10,000 from our super next financial year if we meet the criteria. And Penny's just asked, well, what if you don't need the $10,000? Can you get less than that?
Yes, great question, Penny. And yes, it's up to $10,000. So if you determine that you do not need that much, then you can get anywhere else, anywhere in between, up to that amount of 10,000.
Let me just have a look through another couple of questions.
Thanks, Jo.
Oh, this is a really great question from Rosemary, and actually I'd be curious to find out myself. Rosemary asks, my business is a company of which I'm the director, but I do not have any staff. And would that qualify her as a sole trader?
Great question, Rosemary. You put me on the spot there. I might take that one offline if that's okay. I don't really know your particular circumstances, Rosemary. If you're the director of a company, then my understanding would be no, you would not be a sole trader. But we might take that offline. Happy to have a bit of a chat and see, what your particular circumstances are, and maybe if you're not eligible for something, then maybe we can find something else that you would be eligible for.
Great, Rosemary. I'll write down your details and we'll loop back to you. Let me just look at some other questions here. Okay. Just bear with me, guys. I'm having a read. It looks like there's a couple of people in a similar boat to Rosemary. So, Adam, thank you for that note. We will also loop back to you. Oh, and Claudia is as well. So, okay, this is great. So what we might do is we might answer this question next to the slide deck and the recording that goes on to the AFTA website. And in the email that we send out to everyone with the recording details, we'll answer that question on that, because it definitely looks like it depends on how you've set your business up.
Okay, we'll do a little bit more research and we'll come back to you guys.
Great. Let me just see if I can pull out a few more questions.
Thanks, Jo.
Oh, so Anna's just asked if we know about the documentation Centrelink will require to obtain JobSeeker allowance. And we don't specifically know, and looking at the website, the government's website, the paperwork they ask you for is different for different people. So you would need to start the process to ascertain what paperwork you are required for you.
Thanks, that's correct, Jo. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions? A lot of these questions are quite similar, so I'm just having a look through them. Okay, we have a question here on the cash flow boosts, and I'll read this out, Courtney, and hopefully you're not a visual person and you can digest this. For the cash flow boosts, if your withholding tax for the March quarter is less than 10,000, will you only receive the first payment of $10,000 and not receive the subsequent additional payments unless your withholding in that quarter is over $10,000?
So no, so you would receive if you had a withholding amount. I might come back on this question, but my understanding is if you had a withholding amount of $10,000 in the March quarter, you would be eligible to receive 150% of that back. Okay, so that would give you a credit of 15,000, right? Because it's applied 150% in the quarterly VAS to ensure that it's kept fair with the March monthly lodges. Sorry, and then you would have 50% calculated in the following quarter as well. I might do a quick count and come back on that one as well.
Okay.
That's okay.
Brooke, I've written down your details so we can loop back on that. And we can look, therefore, specifically at your situation, because, of course, everybody's different.
Everybody's different in those circumstances. Great.
Okay, I'm just having a look through some of the other questions. Oh, great. Great question. Are we still allowed to have our offices open? I can answer this one if you like, Courtney.
Yeah, go for it, Jo.
So yeah, the government has announced, obviously, non-essential services must be closed, but I do appreciate that in some of the language that's confusing. So I think a better way to look at it is anything, a place of social gathering is what the government has advised and directed needs to be closed, because this is all about reducing contact between individuals to reduce the likelihood that the virus will spread. So I did watch the news item the other day that said 80% of our population must abide by the social distancing and self-isolating measures if it's to be effective to reduce the spread of COVID-19. So many businesses, including travel agencies, can remain open. However, you must practice the social distancing protocols that have been put in place and the personal hygiene recommendations such as washing hands. So you can be open for business until we, until we hear further announcements that further closures will come into place. The government was very clear, or Scott Morrison was very clear in saying that anyone that has a job now is an essential service. And no doubt the work that travel agencies and travel consultants are doing is very important, because we have a lot of work to do to support affected consumers. Okay, let me just see if I've got another question here.
Thanks, Jo.
I've got a question from John. Thanks, John. John asked, do we need to lodge and pay BAS March payment and wait for the credit to come back, or just lodge and not pay for a smaller credit?
So you would lodge your March BAS as per normal. The credit would be applied automatically to the payment. So you wouldn't put your payment through, it would be applied automatically, and then the balance would be either what you would end up having to pay, or it would be a credit to your bank account, which would be in turn refunded.
Great. I've got a question from Max here, which I believe relates back to the boosting business question we had before. Max just asks, is 100% salary payment paid back as whenever we pay in salary, or is it only a tax portion?
Sorry, can you read that out again?
So Max has asked a question where I believe it's linked to that boosting business cash flow we had earlier. Max has just asked, and excuse me, I'm just trying to digest the texting here, Max. He's asked, is the 100% salary payment paid back as whatever we paid in salary, or the tax portion only?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, it's not salary and wages, it's the tax portion. So it's the PAYG withholding amount that you would normally remit to the tax office in your BAS. I hope that clears that up, Matt.
Okay. I just have a question here from Melissa. Her audio cut out when we were talking about part of the second package, like the package offering. Melissa just asked, employees to receive a payment equal to 100% of their salary and wages withheld. Is this staff wages, she asks?
No, it's 100% of the PAYG withholding amount, not the wages.
Great, thanks for clarifying, Courtney.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just reading through the questions as they pop in to the question toolbox.
Okay.
Okay, so Courtney, what if you're in your first full year of trading and you have not yet set up your BAS? Would you still get tax relief? And I guess the question probably to ask Deborah, who's asked this question, is she set up as a sole trader or a company? Because
yeah,
of course,
I think that's really important, is to know the structure of how her business has been set up, and whether she's paid any wages at all for that period. And
She's just said she's a sole trader.
Okay. So if she's a sole trader, I expect she maybe has some subcontractors. So she's not paying salary and wages, perhaps, in which turn she would not be paying PAYG withholding. She probably wouldn't be eligible for the boost in cash flow. However, there are other initiatives that she would be eligible for that we spoke about earlier, such as the superannuation or the SME loan, perhaps.
Yes. I think in that case, you'd be able to apply under the sole trader and get the benefits through that means.
Correct. And also if she was able to demonstrate a significant reduction in her income, she'd also be eligible to apply for the JobSeeker coronavirus supplement as well. Worth noting that too.
Great, okay. I've got a question here from Monique. She's just asked, with the cash booster via BAS, I only have one casual and tax would only be about $600 for the quarter. Would it only be calculated on that, or would I receive the $10,000 that the government language says is a minimum?
You would be eligible for the minimum payment that the government has said. So that is great news for your business then, because that would be the whole idea of this is a cash boost, a cash injection to assist with your cash flow. So a measure like this will hopefully really assist with your cash flow. That's great.
Great, that's fantastic. I have a great question here from Josh. And hi, Josh, I've seen your name pop up on quite a few of our webinars, so thank you for joining us again today. Josh is asking us, and I believe Jason touched on this in his webinar on Wednesday. He said, has it been raised before if we apply for a refund and or a credit and that airline goes under? Josh says, well, then what? Are we as a business liable to pay the client? I'm not sure if you want to answer that, Courtney, or I can.
Yeah, Josh, that's a really great question. It's one that we've been getting a lot. What I will say to that is, at the moment, we have work afoot with the government. We are working incredibly close with the government, with the Reserve Bank, with Treasury, with the Coronavirus BLU, the Business Liaison Unit, because we know that this is a problem for our industry. We think we have a solution. We're very close to be able to deliver a solution to our industry, which we hope is really going to create some consumer confidence around this issue. I expect probably sometime next week, perhaps we'll be able to provide a little bit more information on that once we've had some further discussions with government.
Great, and I will just add to that Jason said in his webinar, in these circumstances, go back to your terms and conditions to which the customer agreed to when they purchased the ticket. These are unprecedented times, and whilst you as the person that has sold the ticket feel a level of onus, it's not your responsibility, it's not your fault this pandemic has happened. So therefore you need to also be conscious to make business decisions that protect you and your business and your family. So I can speak from a personal point of view that I would not pay it and you would not be liable to pay it. And in many cases, if the airline is going to refund some of the money, some businesses have been choosing to not refund what was agreed in the cancellation terms and conditions.
That's great advice, Jo. Thank you.
All right, I think let's have a look. There's quite a few questions here just relating to everybody's individual circumstances. And so I'll just reiterate what Courtney said earlier. If you have a question linked to your structure or what you're eligible for, or if you're currently a sole trader but you're paying yourself, what are you eligible for? I think all this nitty-gritty detail, it would be wise to go and speak to your accountant. We hosted a fantastic webinar. I think it was, what is today? Friday, the days are all blending together. I think it was on Wednesday,
Wednesday, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, with DFK Accountants. They're an expert business firm. And that webinar recording is on the website. And I would advise you to go and watch that because it was in 3 parts. The first part was talking about business accounting advice. The next part covered off some wonderful HR advice about redundancy, standing staff down, and access to government support. And then the third part looked at marketing, and not in the sense of going out and selling travel, but what can you do to be there, support your customers, and communicate with your customers in this difficult time. So I encourage you to go back and look at that webinar because it also had some great questions and answers in there. And their details, the DFK team's details, are on the website. So if you don't have an accountant that you can rely on, may I encourage you to contact one of the partners at DFK and speak to them about your circumstances.
Thanks, Jo.
Well, we might leave it there. We have promised to loop back to a few people, so we will do that. Just give us a little bit of time to compile the correct answers and, as Courtney said, speak to the right people in government to get the right answers for you. Again, we encourage you to go to business.gov.au and do some investigating and find information relevant for you. And I would like to just conclude by saying that if you are experiencing personal difficulties and you do need to speak to someone and you feel that you're not coping, please reach out. There are some great organisations out there that you can talk to, including Lifeline. Their number is 13 11 14. So you're not in this alone. So please reach out and get the help that you need to. We're going to end the webinar there. Again, this recording will be on the AFTA website, and visit it because we have a great series of number of webinars lined up for next week with more business advice. And launching next Friday at 2 o'clock, Jason is going to do a weekly wrap up, and we're going to try and do this on a weekly basis. So what's the state of the nation? What's AFTA been working on? And we're going to host that every Friday so that members can stay connected, informed, and supported. So thank you very much for your time, everybody.
Thanks, Jo.